Hi, everyone. This is Molly from the Breathe Network, and we're going to do another one of our live interviews with a Breathe Network member. So just give me a second to get this set up, and I am going to invite, oops. I'm going to invite someone to join us. So new to Instagram Live. So I kind of have to relearn it every time I come on here. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, hi, hi.
We made it.
I know, I know. And I just want to take a moment, all the seriousness going on in the world right now, and say that it takes a lot of work to get on these lives and have your setup right and make sure you're plugged in, but also propped up. And yeah, I'm using all kinds of fun stuff to to make this
It's,
work.
if people could see outside of the little box, they would see like I'm balancing my phone right now on a box of like um, organic cheddar bunny crackers that my daughter eats. You know what I mean? And I just sat down. I was like, I'm kind of uncomfortable. I shoved a little purse behind my back. I got a heating pad on one of my hips.
Yeah,
So yes,
it's
yes,
the
there
real,
is.
real, it's
It,
how it is.
it totally is. So, welcome. And
Thank you.
I'm just going to let anyone who is joining or who's going to watch this later know a little bit about who we are and why we're here having this
Mhm.
conversation today. So, I think this is our third interview in our Shades and Shapes of Healing series. And today I'm here with Tracy Holemeyer. And this series is really an opportunity for us to just connect with people in a different way, to share more about what the Breathe Network does in the world for survivors of sexual violence and for the practitioners and communities that support them, to talk about why we do it, kind of what we identified in the anti-violence movement and also really in the trauma healing movement that was not specifically serving the sexual trauma survivor population in the ways that they
Mhm.
deserve to be served. And then how we do it, how we're working with practitioners and survivors and larger organizations to just increase people's access to trauma informed holistic healing resources. So today I thought we would start by sharing a little bit about your bio. I don't always read people's bios, but I think that because it inspired a couple questions, it's
Oh,
really, for me, feels like a place to start. Would it be okay if I just read like a short excerpt? I know your bios will be
sure.
probably a little bit longer than what I'm going to share.
That's fine.
Okay, and then we'll go into questions. So, Tracy Holemeyer is a somatic practitioner and multimodal soul guide who helps humans heal, reclaim, embody, align, remember their wholeness, and live in their truth.
Mhm.
As a trauma responsive facilitator, Tracy offers breathwork, meditation, somatic experiencing, and sacred initiations. So, I wanted to start just by talking about your choice to use the language of trauma responsive. So, we often hear, trauma informed, trauma sensitive. I've heard trauma focused. And I don't know, it could just be like the language that you use, or maybe it
Mhm.
was something that was really purposeful for you to choose responsive versus some of the other, maybe more commonly used ways to describe what is similar work, but maybe differs in terms of training or experience or a focus.
Yeah. And I appreciate the question. I do, and I guess it kind of applies here in this responsive way, is that I don't feel like I can fully dive into this without acknowledging all of the harm that's happening all over the world. But then just this morning, we had another school shooting in Minneapolis, and I think there is in the what I want to share about being responsive is that we are responding to, we're not just
Mhm.
aware of, there is an awareness of what's happening and being with, but responding to means we're naming it when it's in the room, and we're slowing down when, patterns or physiology respond to the trauma. We're responding to that. And it's not to me that any of those other words aren't good. It's that it feels more complete to say what I offer and how I show up in the world is in a responsive way. And when tragedy is happening, how are we responding to that in the moment,
Mm,
rather than just being informed by it or getting our awareness, around it? Like, how did we move into action? And action doesn't always mean more doing. Sometimes it's being with that's the action, or
mhm,
being with that's the doing. And so trauma responsive felt more real to how um, I identify, if you will, as like a tender, whether
mm,
it's I'm tending birth, or I'm tending grief, or I'm tending embodiment, or I'm tending trauma, or the nervous system that experienced trauma. And there is
mhm,
that responsiveness in there, that felt more complete of a picture than just being informed by. Yeah. And so
yeah.
I, in responding, like saying that, and then just wanting to take a minute, and, the, there is, this is not to miss any of the other terrible tragedies that are happening around the world, that I know both you and I are very passionate about.
Mhm,
But I just want to tend for a moment that intensity
mhm,
of grief that comes with yet
mhm,
another shooting in this country.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you naming that.
Yeah.
How is it for you to be here on a call with me, given
Yeah.
that?
Well, and it's also that I got to spend some time with it because I was on calls this morning before this, and so
Yeah.
getting to spend some time and hearing more of the news and what's coming
Mm,
out. And there is a fire in it for me. There is absolutely
mm,
heat of that enraged transformation, piece that comes up. There's the grief and the longing and the empathy towards loss, you
mm,
know. And I know that's not what we intended, here for this in our chat here. And that's part of what being responsive is to not, I could be informed by it and pretend it's not in the room. I
mhm.
feel the same way about what's happening across the globe, and right here at home as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the ways that those experiences, whether there's something really acute,
Hmm.
or it's something that's ongoing, show up,
Right.
like it's all trauma.
It is.
So it's
It is.
the grief and the loss, and I think for a lot of us, there's that sense of helplessness that's
Hmm.
all too familiar,
Hmm.
which I think is also why this kind of work is so important,
Yeah.
so that we can, a lot of we have very similar teachers, so a lot of it is
Hmm.
like all of it getting packaged together. Like, oh, here we go again. I'm familiar with
Yeah.
this grief or shock or helplessness. And then it's like, how can we separate it out enough so that we can do something with it, or
Yeah.
we can process it, but that it doesn't completely overcome us all over
Hmm.
again. And it's not to
Hmm.
say that it doesn't overcome us for in different ways, and for
Right.
moments or hours or days or weeks, but
Yeah.
yeah, so I really appreciate you naming that. I know for myself it's like, it is hard for me to hear that and
Mm.
to really let myself, um, pay too much attention when my child's not home.
Yeah.
She's in that space, right?
Yeah.
So she's at school, she's at camp.
Hmm.
So it's like I see it and I'm just like, okay, not this is you set this aside until pickup,
Right.
and like that's been my strategy
Hmm.
for a couple of years. I have a young
Hmm.
child who, so many of us have children that are in school or loved ones
Hmm.
that work in schools. So it is like, I'm like, okay, well, this is until I figured out that as this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to basically like see it, turn it off.
Yeah.
until 3 p.m., I would kind of just be panicking,
Hmm.
most of the day, or I'd drive close to the school
Hmm. Hmm.
and just be like, I'll just work in a coffee shop right by the school.
Yep.
That's what I'm
Yep.
going to do.
Yep.
Like I did that
Yeah.
for years,
Yeah.
where if something would come up, I would be like, I'm just
Hmm.
going to go drive and
Yep.
place myself close enough that if anything happens, I'm there,
Yeah.
So it's like, so I appreciate you naming it, because there might be people like me who saw that news or haven't even seen the news because there's so much news
Right. Right.
nationally and
Hmm.
globally.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. That it's just like there's a lot of different ways that we meet it.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that it's however we meet it, I think it's okay, but I think it needs to get met at some
Hmm.
point because it meets us. So it's like,
It's so true. Yeah. And my son, it's interesting you said that because he's going to be 25 in September, and
mm,
I went from experiencing this as the mother of a child that's a student to now he works in a school. And I
yeah,
know,
okay,
oof, this is where mine comes. Like I know my son, and I know what he would take action, and I'm so proud of him for that because he would step in and he would protect others, maybe at the cost of him. And that's just something that I have to rock, because I would never take that from him. I would never ask him to not be that. And it
yeah,
makes you really confront like what that means to have a child that grows up to be a young man that is that type of person, that he would, he works in that environment and he is always aware that
yeah,
that is on, and so
yeah,
yeah, I just there's a part of me that's like, we'll get to what we can, but it really
yeah,
is,
it's
that's a
fine.
piece about that responsiveness that's like, this is here, and we have to also be intentional about modeling how not to bypass it, or
Yeah,
not to not, however you meet it, like you said,
yeah,
is appropriate, and it asks to be met. So
yeah.
thanks for allowing me to go into that a little and
Oh, yeah. Thank you
be
for
with it.
allowing me to go into it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah, so I think you just really showed us like that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
you in any space, it's like you show up to teach a yoga class, and if you're trauma
That's it.
responsive and people
That's it.
come in and it's a day like today or a day like yesterday or whatever, you
Hmm.
read the room,
Hmm.
you make a different choice. You're like, oh, I had
That's it.
this plan that we were going to like learn all these new complex things. And it's like, actually, I think today is a day to go with what's really familiar, what's
Yeah.
most accessible, give people a lot of freedom. It's like you
Hmm.
just have to be able to make those
Yeah.
changes in the moment.
Yeah, and that's an exact example that I've had to write. I live in Southern California, and there is a lot going on with ICE. My
Oh,
communities are deeply, deeply impacted, and it has been showing up to teach a yoga class or to teach a breathwork class and asking who's in the room and are you okay?
yeah,
Right, and to know that that space is there, and that we can bend the work around the need instead of setting the need to the side to do the work, right? And when
yeah,
it's one-on-one clients, couples, groups, experiential, or my neighbor, that we can be responsive to. And it doesn't mean, I also think that on the flip side, when we get to a healing point, that we start to have to decenter all of our trauma a little bit to really show up in the room, not
hmm,
without it, but it doesn't have to be the only thing too. So there's this balance of like really learning how to be with what is, and some of it relinquishing to the mystery of relational healing and things like that. And yeah, but it's been a real thing, showing up and having witnessed somebody be taken that day,
yeah,
and the feeling of helplessness, and what do I do and how do I help, and also providing sanctuary, that's a place they go to work with and through some of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you so much for
Mhm.
sharing that. It's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some other questions I think that I'm going to ask you that kind of relate to
Hmm.
like, well, then how do you do that?
Yeah.
Like so many times, if you are in a training where you're teaching people, like I spend time doing trauma informed yoga teacher trainings, and people really want like a script.
Yep.
Like, okay, well, what are the poses that I'm going to do? What are the exact words I should say? And I'm like, that's not going to be
Yeah.
how it works. And
Yeah.
so you have to build something inside yourself
Hmm.
to make changes in the moment, or to just slow down enough until you figure out like, well, where do we go from here? And that
Yeah.
happens in like, as you know, as an SE practitioner, it's like, oh, let's pause for a moment
Hmm.
before we figure out where we're going next. Let's see, maybe something will just organically come through.
Right. Yeah. When we get out of its way a little bit
Right.
by slowing down, or by, maybe not letting, let's say, a meaning maker lead, or, the story lead,
Yeah.
how we think, the steps, the protocol, because there is something inherently, we are born with the ability to heal.
Yeah.
And so if we can come back to that and create a space for the healing to happen, it happens, um, in its, in the time that it takes, in the way that it should go for its best outcome, and it's all of the things that get in the way. And so there is being with emergence, that it is part of being trauma responsive, is to be with what is emergent in the process,
Hmm.
and definitely tending self and then other as well, because if we're not working with what's happening to us, we're not really in a position to, I mean, we might be able to hold, we might be able to do it, but how beneficial it can be, how much it's adding, how much it's contributing to the healing, is proportionate to how we're tending ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's that's a whole topic. That's a whole
Yeah.
book, really, or a
Yeah.
whole many books
Yeah.
about how people's own ability or capacity to work on their healing journey
Hmm.
influences or can impact how they're showing up for others. And it's not to say, like, I don't think it's a binary thing where if you're in the middle of stuff and you don't have space to work on it, that you can't show up and provide really good care. But I think
Sure.
there's a toll that these things take, or there's an impact, and that
Yeah.
impact might just be that we had to further dissociate from our own selves to show up for somebody else who's in
Yeah.
crisis, or that we couldn't show up in a more embodied way and meet that person in a way that they could really feel.
Yeah.
So some of those things we can't measure, or we don't know, but we can make guesses about it, based
Hmm.
on, I'm sure every person who's working in the trauma healing realm in any capacity, whether as a therapist or a yoga teacher, or an advocate that's responding from a DV or rape crisis center, everyone's had those moments where they've not been fully inside of themselves or with themselves when they've had to provide care, and they've
Right.
done it.
Right.
They've done
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
thank goodness they're there. And
Yeah.
it's like all of these movements could be so much more lifted up and supported and more sustainable if everybody was getting the kind of care that they
That's
really
right.
deserve.
Yeah. And I think
Um,
that's the piece, right? Is that it doesn't mean that I am always in my most flexible, accessible parts of myself, but that there is
yeah,
the continuous responsibility and accountability to it, so that if I notice, wow, I'm not in that one, that I have an option in the moment to be clear about that, right?
yeah,
And get support that I need in the moment, or two, tend it after I've gone into, if it's a crisis, right? If
yeah.
that needs to be decentered for a moment to really be with what is, that then we come back to it and we get the support we need. And I also wanted to just, I saw a comment here about
Yeah, I wanted to
the,
talk about that
yeah.
comment too. It was a great comment.
Yeah,
Thank you for
yeah.
making it.
Yeah. This idea about being programmed. I think programmed is one word, conditioned is another word, to know exactly what to do, because it's really quite impossible to do that. But if we're chasing that, if we can't do it until we have the exact right thing, we'll never have the exact right thing, and then we're less inclined to engage or participate or contribute. Yeah, and so that intuition piece is really important and necessary, and being willing to not, what does it mean if we don't know exactly what to do in this culture, that, and for particular bodies, if they don't know exactly what to do, can be very dangerous.
Yeah.
So not
Yes, totally.
minimizing that need. And also, when that's not at stake, can we be a little bit more in the I don't know,
Yeah.
and
Well,
let
and I
that
think,
be its own emergent process? Yeah.
yes, and I think it's an
Mm-hmm.
old model that a lot of people are questioning more and more. This idea that
Yeah.
that hierarchy of the practitioner knows something, it's very disempowering to their
Mm-hmm.
client or student or patient that they don't know. And it's like, if you use your intuition, that's just a different kind of knowledge. It's not like
Yeah.
something that you memorize. So it's even, a lot of the teaching and education that many people get is like, here's the knowledge, go use it, versus what do you know inside yourself about your
That's
own
it.
experience, and
That's it.
how can that also complement what you're learning here? How can you use that education you're getting combined with your own insights to show up
Mm-hmm.
for people? So
Mm-hmm.
I just loved that they made that comment about
Yeah.
intuition, because that is a
Yeah.
lot of what it is.
And this idea that I said this to a client just this morning. I said, I may have an idea about what's going on. I've trained and I've studied and I understand how these systems work. And the only expert in the room on your body is you.
Yeah.
And so there's this piece around. I have a big puppers here with me. He just got
Oh,
up.
cute.
I was hoping he was going to come into the field,
That
but he
would,
is
I would
this
love to
morning.
see a little dog
Oh,
face.
he's right over there.
Oh my goodness. Hi, buddy.
Yeah. So he's a
Oh,
golden doodle, and his name is Dude, but it's Dood, like doodle.
oh,
So
that's
cute, right? So
perfect.
just say
So
hi, Dude.
cute.
Always like, but yeah. So that piece around that, when we lead with our intuition as well as our training, right? There's a great line that's like, and I believe in this, is that it is experience and education
Yeah,
that can move us towards expertise, if there is such a thing. And when we move with that in our own systems, we're also inviting whoever is with us in that space, that reminder as well. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to see if it makes sense to get back to some of the things I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about. I think that it does.
Yeah.
Um, we can spend as little or as much time on this as you want.
Mm-hmm.
But I did kind of want to ask about you mentioning yourself as some of the work you do as being a soul guide.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see the word, like, intuition doesn't mean soul, but I feel like that word hangs out in this realm of some of the things that are less seen or harder to measure or sometimes less valued
Mm-hmm.
in certain spaces or questioned in some ways. And so I just want to come back to this idea of, what does it mean to be, I want to use your exact word, soul guide.
Mm-hmm.
And especially because in the anti-violence realm, historically, kind of the spirit and the body have often been left out of the conversation about how we heal or how we get impacted by trauma. The resources that are provided are very much like cognitive oriented. So, what does it mean to be a soul guide? And I guess, what for you is the value of naming that part of the human person, knowing that not necessarily everyone identifies with like
Mm-hmm.
having a soul or a spirit, but for you and for the folks you've served, what's the benefit of working with that aspect of our personhood in our recovery journey?
Yeah. I appreciate the way that you frame that, because the way I believe in this is not a one size fits all, and there is
Okay.
no expectation for my belief to be right, or for everyone, or any of those things. I'm a recovering Catholic. I was raised in a Catholic church, and so I learned so much of what was good didn't exist here in the body. And when I
Mm-hmm.
started really interrogating those things. And instead of, at first I just pushed it all away and I didn't want any parts of it. And now it was like this evolution of like, okay, well, maybe I can take a look at it. Maybe I can try to get a little closer to it and find out, what else is here? What are my beliefs other than what I was, conditioned or indoctrinated into? And what I arrived at was like that there is this, what I believe is that there is a source, and this source to me is all existences, all beings, all of creation. It is not a thing that creates us, but that we collaborate in the creation of through this soul existence. So the soul is the expression of this source that can move through different experience, sometimes in a human body, maybe sometimes as a rock, maybe sometimes as a wind or an element or a creature or any of those things that the soul experiences through the vitality of the life death cycle, experiential to inform this greater source. And the source to me is what I would say is like the collective, and that all souls are a part of, come from, return to, and that there is this amalgamation of experience through an embodied experience. And that the soul, I like to say, like, the soul or spirit, the collective, doesn't know what cilantro smells like until it experiences it through a body, or what
Mhm.
type of awe can come from a giggle that you hear because we have an auditory experience in a body. And so what I believe for myself is that my soul lives actually at the soles of my feet to keep me on earth in this experiential process, that it is also the tether and the reminder to what is greater than me, beyond me, that is also my responsibility to tend to as well. So
Mm.
when I think about that, right, there is an element of responsibility towards this experience in a body for this soul to be an information. And then vice versa. The soul feels like a translator through dream work, through ancestral or heritage, generational healing, past life things, all of that, from cosmos to elements, etc. It feels like this great translator between what we don't remember when we're in a body and the
Mhm.
body itself while we're in one. So soul work to me is, um, when we tend this body's experience, there is a soul is like the translator in a way to this collective experience. And then as I'm talking, I can feel it going, whoa, so
Mhm.
also holding on to that, I don't know, right? That
Mhm.
that soul work is also mystery, and that this is
Mhm.
what this little body has contorted into an idea, and
Mhm.
it feels informed, and it feels right and in alignment for this experience that I'm having
Mhm.
while here. So in soul work, right, there's this collective experience. It's like fairy tale or dream work around this idea of how we stay informed and how we're informed by something that isn't, you know, quantifiable on a scale that science can say is true or not true.
Mhm. Okay, so that was really beautiful. And
Oh, thank you.
I'm like, you've really thought it out or felt it
Yeah,
out or
yeah.
sensed it out. Such a like coherent response
Mm,
to such a big question in a
mm,
way. So given all of that, how does that help the a survivor of sexual trauma? How does working at that level, why would that be uniquely helpful
mhm.
or supportive to their recovery process? Like, where does spirit and soul come into it?
Yeah, I think it can be a ballast in a way, to return to a level of remembering and intactness and you also said an important word there, like coherence, which we know through like the SE model is more about like the systems all being involved, all
Mm-hmm.
online, all functioning together, the intricacies, the overlap, all of those pieces. But I also think that there is an aspect of embodiment and soul work that it fills in more of the picture, right? Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
soul, that there is this human body in I did one of my advanced trainings with Raja, and he talks about the ether element, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
there is, my body is experiencing this, I am not. And that is not in a diminishment to what has happened to the body. It's
Mm-hmm.
very serious, but it actually helps recognize that there is a more substantial being than trauma can even happen to. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
dismissive of the human experience, but this, for me, I can feel it in my body. I kind of can rest back into my soul's experience,
Mm-hmm.
not in diminishment or minimizing of what the human experience is, but the mm, I'm careful to use this word, but like faith with a capital F of what is also greater beyond this. And I think people who, let's say, believe in deeply in their religion would that could be kind of comparable to them, is that they're resting back into this greater knowing of something
Mm-hmm.
beyond this bodily form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Thank
so,
you.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I guess
Keep going.
how that helps, I think, is there is uh, less fragmenting in that, because trauma can feel very fragmenting. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
this encapsulation where we might feel some fragmentation that can help us feel more of our wholeness as an organism and then a being beyond this organism.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I feel like I could talk about that for hours, how it helps. I think it gives us something to feel supported by, can give us something to feel supported by. And when we have very necessarily needed to dissociate from the human experience of trauma, there is
Mm-hmm.
still a level of that intactness and wholeness in being in
Mm-hmm.
relationship to soul. And soul, if soul connects us to a collective, that we are always held by that, no matter what's happened or who does or doesn't believe us, support us, agree with us, want to help us, or, the opposite adds to our suffering and pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. We could talk about this for a really long time because I think,
Yeah.
because it brings up these questions of like, okay, so we talk about like dissociation as it's sort of like a psychological experience. We talk about freeze as a physiological state. But then if you talk with survivors or you are one yourself, and I had this experience, there is often reporting of leaving one's body
Mm-hmm.
during the
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming experience, whether it's sexual violence or a surgery or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And I feel like we don't talk about that part of the trauma experience enough, like how, like we don't create spaces, the kind of space
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about, where people could sort of grapple with that. It's sort of like I had this really intense experience. Like I always thought, like I feel like when I was raped, it was a spiritual experience, not
Mm-hmm.
one that I liked, not that it was not positive in any way, but something happened that I didn't have language for and was not being named in any of the mainstream spaces I was going seeking care. So then it was like, oh, so I just had an out of body experience, but I'm left alone to kind of figure out what that was.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why there's all this fear around it. I think it's, there's one of the many reasons is probably because a lot of people that have created the structures of the anti-violence movement have their own limitations on maybe their own healing work that has gotten in the way of other people feeling like or providing access to those
Hmm.
conversations. But I was in a training with Peter Levine like 10, 15 years ago. He was talking about a traumatic experience he had gone through, and he said, it was as if I was leaving my body. And then he paused and he said, it was more than as
Yeah.
if. He was like, it's not just as if,
Hmm.
it's more than that. And he
Yeah.
didn't try to like get into what the more than that meant, but he was very clear to be like, no, it was more than as
Yeah.
if. And that really struck me because I was like, so rare to see a trauma educator that has all of the science behind them naming this part of the experience. And I think, you and I as somatic experiencing practitioners, like we get to have that be in the room.
Yeah.
We don't have to leave that out, and was part of why I love SE so much.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
just really appreciate your way of talking about it, because I do think that we've actually cut people off from a resource that might be available to them. And we've also left them alone with like really
Yeah.
big existential kind of questions about
100%.
what happened. And it's like, that's a terrible thing to do.
Hmm. Yeah. And re-traumatizing and adding to the trauma and all of those of the already difficult experience. It really
Mm-hmm.
is. And thank you for sharing part of yours. And I think there's something, one of the, I want to say I'm going to get it wrong. It maybe tantric, is like portals of transformation, right? It's birth, death, life, um, meditation, sex, trauma, right? All of those other
Mm-hmm.
things that they
Mm-hmm.
can be portals of transformation, not that they
Mm-hmm.
are or have to be. But I
Mm-hmm.
think there is something about that. And I use the word mystery kind of interchangeably with this source collective because it is a mystery,
Mm-hmm.
that we can again think we know and have it all figured out. All right, and we were not going to know until we're beyond this bodily experience. And I think that there is a huge disservice, and I think it is an incompleteness. And I also want to name that if you go back to original and indigenous cultures, this is not missing. In fact,
Right.
it must be centered. So when I look at one of the questions I kind of navigate my life by, and then in my work with people I get to sit with, is this not judging is this good or bad, but how it's functioning. And how
Mm-hmm.
might it function in a society to strip us of this thing? Who benefits
Right.
from that? Who is at an advantage with us being without this type of connection? So yeah, there's that piece as well, because
Yeah.
indigenous and original cultures, there was no separation.
Right.
There
Right.
was no not that.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which can take you into a whole conversation about colonization and then whiteness and white
Yep.
supremacy and how it's actually its influence in the anti-sexual violence movement and
Yes.
the ways that systems and structures got designed, what resources were valued. And we can see today still the resources that are valued are those that are involved with the criminal legal system
That's it.
that really don't have a whole lot to do with the survivor themselves and their healing process. But if you want to write a grant and get funding from the federal government for um, doing a trauma informed cop training, the
Mm-hmm.
money's there,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
increasing prosecutions. It's like there's
Yeah.
so much money for that. But
Yeah.
if you dare say, like, we want to help survivors feel safe in their bodies through this holistic healing training or immersion or building up our holistic resources at our rape crisis center,
Mm-hmm.
the money, there is not funding for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a place where we see the values of mainstream culture get reflected in the movement. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's why there's
Mm-hmm.
such a deep dissatisfaction with the movement for so many of us who are survivors and then who worked in those more mainstream spaces and have had to exit because we
Yeah.
saw those limitations and we saw the kind of the replaying of trauma and traumatic systems happening within this very institutions or organizations that were supposedly set up to help people recover.
That's right. Or that to act like they care about the survivor at all. And it often plays out. It's like, sure, we're willing to give the help, but are you willing to contribute to looking at the systems that enable it? No.
Right.
No. Well, sure, you can come give a talk about, what's gone on or what your experience was, but try to keep it to a minimum of, not too emotional or any of those things. Like give us the signs that we can look out for, and then give us some cards we can pass out to help people. It's in all ways, but there isn't any willingness to look at how these systems actually contribute to enabling and keeping us stuck in um, these expressions of trauma.
Yeah. 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 I'm like, oh, we could. Now I'm thinking of some other directions to go, but I want to stay a little bit in the
Yeah.
movement piece,
Yeah.
because this is another area that it's related to that last conversation. When I, have looked at the history of your work and saw, you were involved, and you may still be, so feel free to say more about that, with the nonprofit that was working with survivors of domestic violence. It got me thinking a lot about your experience in those spaces. My experience working at a rape crisis center for a very long time, and just in the anti-sexual violence movement, and knowing and seeing how those two movements get really separated from each other. There's like the
Mm-hmm.
DV movement and the anti-SV movement,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm wondering if you could share about maybe what is the overlap between sexual violence and domestic violence, because even though we all got separated out at different organizations, we were often serving very similar populations, and we were all having to work within the same
Mm-hmm.
systems and structures. But yet it created, I know from my time, it specifically when I was at a rape crisis center, there was just this weird, it was a weird separation. It was like these are two different cultures here. There's the anti-sexual violence culture and the anti-domestic violence culture, and they don't talk to each other. We have separate
Yeah.
conferences, we are in totally separate organizations, and yet we are serving the same population a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
time, or we have overlap. So could you share a little bit about, what those overlaps look like it from your perspective as a practitioner, having worked in a lot of different spaces, and also maybe what are some of the differences that make those experiences unique from each other and requiring a different way, a different skill set for how we show up for them?
Yeah. I I I, I read your this question earlier, and I was kind of like, I don't know. And then there's the part of me, the part that feels like the biggest miss is the intimacy, vulnerability, interconnectedness. By trying to pull these apart, we're saying that one is different than the other, but the things that are deeply wounded in either situation is the vulnerability, the intimacy, the connectedness, the ability to trust, the ability to share space and feel relative safety. Um, all of those things really do. Sure, domestic violence doesn't always have to include rape, and rape isn't always somebody that in a domestic situation, right? Like
Hmm.
logistically, I can see these different aspects and components, but the woundedness of it, there is the violation of it goes beyond whether my partner in a home hurt me physically, emotionally, verbally, financially, whatever, and somebody essaying me, right? That the the core, the net of the human is impacted in those very real ways either way. And I think this is what happens in a lot of situations, even within each of those categories, is this comparison thing,
Hmm.
and how somebody's was worse than mine and mine was worse than somebody else's and all of those other things. But we can't put our pain on a scale and measure it against somebody else's, because there is context and there is feeling and there is prior experience and access to support and healing and all of those other pieces. And so it stumps me, I guess. I don't have a
Mm,
clear answer on this because
yeah.
they are inextricably linked, and I can
Mm,
see how SA survivors might need care in a different way than DV survivors might
mm-hmm,
in certain aspects of it,
mm-hmm,
right? There is violence in a home and needing safety in an exterior way, an outside of way, but then there's the violence that happened in the inner home in either
mm-hmm.
situation that
Yeah.
needs the repair. So the overlap is like the inner work, and then maybe the external aspects differ and vary, but I don't think that it's a service for them to be separate. I think that
Mm-hmm,
there should be tending, like the internal experience should be collective, and
mm,
then how we go about supporting that person in an exterior way, an external way, maybe that differs or varies. But I am stumped at how, to me, it just seems like maybe some attempt at control or separating, because historically, um, sexual violence, the deviance of sexual violence was always shadowed. And so if we can make it about domestic violence, maybe we don't touch that topic as much,
mm,
right?
mm.
If you look historically through, uh, you know, 17, 1800s, when they noticed something happening with a body of people, and then that body of people all had sexual violence in common, everything got shut down and it went away,
Mm-hmm. Right.
right? So it's, there's almost like this, if we separate it out, if we don't tend it in the same way, if we don't talk about it in the same way, that the powers that be that want that to not be looked at get to. I'm not really sure. Again, I'm not sure. I wrestle
Yeah.
with this a lot
Yeah.
because
I
it
think
doesn't make sense.
it doesn't. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's such a good, I'm like, oh gosh, I want to do more investigation and research and have more conversations about this because it's
Mm-hmm.
something that has irritated me my whole, I think I joined the movement just over 20 years ago. And I always felt like, why are we so separate? We face some very similar stigmas in the culture, although we also face different stigmas. Like we still
Yeah.
get stigma. We both groups get stigmatized. Both groups get heavily shamed, but
Mm-hmm.
in slightly different ways at different times. Um, and what does it do to the populations that are the majority who are experiencing it, that we are working in these more separate ways versus collaborating around like our
That's it.
those overlaps and building something from
Yeah.
that place. Like I just, yeah, so I
The only,
appreciate you. Go ahead.
yeah, the only other thing that comes to mind is the separation of, like, in a multimodal approach, and I've seen this more as I'm not a therapist by, um, like the psychology world's definition of what a
Yeah,
therapist is. You know, we call a massage therapist a massage therapist, right? And there's
right,
no
right.
comparison, but their therapeutic modality is in a very specific way. So some people would offer like somatic therapy or, red light therapy, all of those other things. But to
Yeah,
be very clear, I'm not a therapist by the Western medical model's definition of that.
yeah.
And I notice how historically, it has only been recently that I've had potential new clients, uh, come in and say, my therapist said that I should maybe try somatics. Right. This
Mm-hmm.
this is a very recent, like, it's a phenomena to me that I'm like, hold on,
Mm-hmm.
because the systems of the medical model have typically also been out of scarcity, that there's only one way to help a person, and it's the way I
Yeah,
was trained or learned. So that's
yeah.
the only other kind of piece that comes up, is that maybe there's some of that scarcity piece in there around,
Mm-hmm.
again, a communal approach. If all of us came in to hold up anybody that has been harmed, they could get what they need how they need it, rather
Mm-hmm.
than it being, there's this way to treat this and this way to treat this. Again, that
Mm-hmm.
goes right back into white body supremacy and patriarchy and, you know colonialism, that one right way thing. So it's probably bled into that for sure.
Yeah, and this idea that, the things that happen in the home
Mm-hmm.
historically were not to be talked about or named, that there was a separation between your personal life and your life in the public sphere or the political
Yeah.
sphere, which again, people have been calling out for so long. But Yeah, I'm going to keep thinking about this because I think that this
Yeah,
could be a really, I think it could be so important for us to have more of those conversations around those intersections of those particular movements that got separated in
yeah,
some way. And then again, I also think about funding, how funding gets very
that's it.
separated. So then you
Hmm.
have to allocate certain resources for one group, but then you have to fit a certain identity to get other kinds of resources when again our clients are experiencing sexual violence within the home, or they're
Yeah,
experiencing domestic violence but as a child they were also sexually abused. It's like it's the idea that we just have these single experiences or that we fit neatly into any one box is just kind of ludicrous. So
yeah, I totally agree. And I would even that now my wheels are really turning around this like the use of the word domestic and how that compartmentalizes it,
mhm,
because just because it's in a home doesn't make it better or worse than it being a quote unquote stranger, or if it's somebody in
right.
your right. Mine was both. I
Mm,
had sexual violence and domestic violence in my home environment. Wasn't the
mm.
only place that sexual violence existed, but it there was an overlap there. And so yeah, again, that part of me that's like, how does this function is really curious right now. So
Yeah, and like you said, how does it function and who does it benefit that
yeah,
we keep those things
yeah,
there? And it completely, I mean, all of it goes back to many things, but one of which is the systems
hmm,
that have like these are the consequences of those kinds of the systems of patriarchy and white supremacy and misogyny and ableism that
yeah,
disproportionately make certain groups more vulnerable to violence and then give them less access to spaces and places where they can seek resources and accountability
that's it.
and they are not believed by
Hmm.
that mainstream
Hmm.
culture. So this is a whole can of worms.
We just keep pulling it out here, you
I
know.
know, I know. I'm glad I wrote some questions out, but yeah,
Yeah.
we don't really need them. I do want to talk about, I'm so grateful for you've given us so much of your time today. So thank you so much for that. I do want to ask you, this is going to take us back to sort of the beginning of our conversation about how tending to your own nervous system is one of the ways that you practice trauma informed or trauma responsive care. And so, because a lot of the folks that engage with the Breathe Network are not only survivors, but they are also healing professionals or healthcare workers, I wonder if you could say something about this because I don't think we can say this enough.
Mhm.
So, could you share about like how does your own nervous system state or your overall state, it may not just be at a nervous system level, impact or influence how you're showing up for other people?
Yeah, I think it when right, if coherence happens when our systems are all kind of functioning together and we're able to be if there is a stress or a strain on the nervous system, that typically moves a survival strategy that turns into a pattern that turns in, you're right, it's strategy to skill to habit to personality. It's
Mm,
kind of how that goes. But anytime our nervous system is not well functioning in the moment, if we're in a state of hypo or hyper arousal or any type of arousal in that moment, there is a higher likelihood of one of those strategies or patterns running rather than being in a coherent, authentic self state, like self capital S, self state.
hmm
Now, is it can any of us exist in that all the time? No. Is our system going to get activated in moment to moment? For sure.
hmm hmm
And the responsibility of tending to that so it can be really clear is so that my pattern doesn't come up and blow pain into somebody else or blow
mm,
my overwhelm into somebody else. And this is, like Resma Menachem talks a lot about, blowing our pain through other people, but we do it in a lot of ways. I might be
hmm
activated by something I just came out of. And if I don't tend to that in some way, then that's in the room with whoever I'm working with. Now, if we take responsibility, say, hey, this is in the room with me. I'm here with you. I've got you. And I'm also holding this thing. It helps move. It doesn't mean you can't help somebody. or be supportive or show up or share space. And if we don't do that, if we're not naming that, harm can come
Mm-hmm.
if it goes unnamed. If we are, if I had just a really intense moment, right? It's just like coming in here. If I had tried to be in here without acknowledging the pieces we acknowledged in the beginning of this conversation, my presence would kind of be split. There'd be this grief piece that I have to kind of tuck away for later, and not my whole self is able to. And we are whole organisms. And so the
Mm,
more we make space to show up in that whole organism with what is here, tending what's here, we have a greater chance of relating, collaborating, and creating together. Because I'm not the expert on what the other person is bringing either. But
mm.
I can't come to the table if I'm, but I got to put my arm and a toe and an ear over here because,
Right.
right. It's like we're trying to separate out whole parts of ourselves in not tending our systems.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for that. And thank you for just also naming that um, things are going to happen, and
Mm-hmm.
we're none of us is living in like a easeful or our most coherent or most regulated state at all times. That would be impossible.
Yeah.
We need all of our states,
Yep.
especially right now, to respond
Yeah.
and meet these moments that we're enduring. And it's like it's the coming back to the things that show up that is so important. Like if we
Mm-hmm.
can't tend to something in a moment, if something happens when we're commuting to our private practice space and we have a close call with a car, but we have a client that we're meeting with, it's like, well, hopefully at the end of that hour with our client, then we can like take a couple minutes,
Yeah.
and not just let all of the things of our daily life,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes it's daily
Mm-hmm.
stressors that then just accumulate,
Mm-hmm.
and over time that accumulation gets things really muddy or heavy. So
Yeah. And I like to even, I had a really big experience and it was powerful and reparative and transformational, but it was a ton of energy. And I had 20 minutes, right? So I did my things, I danced, I went outside, I got some sunshine, I had a little nourishment, drank some water, went to the bathroom, in this 20-minute period. And I got on the next call and it was still there. And so I just said,
mm,
I'm going to wiggle a little. I got to pretend I have a puppy dog tail for a minute. Hey, this is just what I'm working with,
yeah,
right? And taking
yeah,
responsibility of that, because then the other person isn't going, are they here with me? What's wrong? Right? There's a
right,
vibrational piece to this, a vibratory experience that 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 our body knows is happening with the other person. And if it's
yeah,
not acknowledged, and our past experiences is that we always had to read the room as children, and something is
mm,
off here. Is it me? Am I the problem? Right? And so
right,
it just creates a lot of unnecessary um, difficulty, challenge, even harm. Uh, that if we're tending that and then making requests for what we need, even as the professional in the room, I'm also inviting them to step up and say, I just came in from almost getting run off the road and I need a minute to wiggle it out.
yeah. You're also modeling that
That's it.
it's okay to, we have experiences, they impact us, and you're going to take a moment to
Yeah.
have to be with that experience. And you know that you can do that because you've done a lot of work,
Mm-hmm.
that you trust that your system can actually feel what it feels
Mm-hmm.
and actually move through it. And I think that's part of why somatic approaches to healing can be so empowering, because it's like
Yeah.
you get this confidence in your own system that like it's okay to open something up and to cry for a minute or
Mm-hmm.
two on Instagram live, because I know that I'm not going to spend the whole hour crying. I know that eventually something's going to come in and soften that, or you know and
Mm-hmm.
and so there's that trust because you've done it like a million times now.
Yeah.
So I think it's so great when our clients get to see us
Yeah.
being human with them.
100%. And that relational quality again, right? What does that allow in them to, maybe they've felt like they don't contribute, or maybe they felt like, I'm not helpful for people, or maybe I don't know how to help myself, but then they see how they were able to be with me in that. And it becomes this
Mm,
relational, communal experience of tending that we can all contribute to one another in different ways. And listen, I'm not saying go blow your stuff through your clients or your family or any of those by any stretch. And being transparent, being willing to be vulnerable with what's true for us has a greater impact on the relational, communal aspects, and that's really what we need to come into true full healing. It's
Mm.
one thing to, and I know this was kind of a question you had as well, is
Yeah,
why that
yeah,
communal, if I can just go right into it, is
yeah,
that
yeah.
that communal piece, you can, if I could have done it alone on my mat would have held it all for me and I would have been okay, right? And this piece around we are not injured alone, we can't heal it alone. Our
Mm-hmm.
injuries are relational. We need to heal relationally. And when we don't, that's what we're seeing. The fabric of our entire communities is shredded, torn, pulled, tightened, things like that. And so, this way of relating, even like community can be two people. It can
Mm-hmm.
be us right here, right now. It can be
Mm-hmm.
hundreds, thousands of people. And that tending in a communal way, we are individual beings in a body, and we're a part of that greater collective. And there is more scientific evidence, where you can not know, be hundreds and thousands of miles away from somebody and the phone ring and go, oh, this is happening,
Mm-hmm.
right? there is
Yeah.
there is watching absolute utter devastation in genocides around the world, and I'm brought to my knees. It's not happening
Mm-hmm.
to me. If that was true, if I could just heal alone, then I wouldn't be affected by a global
Mm-hmm.
experience. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Right.
there's this quality of all living beings, including the earth, that we are connected through. And that interconnectedness is what allows for interdependence, that we are independent individuals, completely reliant on a greater community. And so healing has to happen there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So beautiful. So I just love listening to you talk. I really just want to close with one more question because I've asked everybody
Sure.
this, and I don't, I know it's been over an hour,
I'm good.
but I want
Sure.
this to be part of it. Um, so the name of this series is Shades and Shapes of Healing. And I'm just so interested to learn from other survivors and other practitioners, like how do they relate to that word? Like, what is healing for them? And so part of my curiosity for you, I think asking like what is healing in a way you've actually just spent 60 minutes telling us. So I treasure that. So I'm wanting to ask you if you could share with us what for you is maybe the shade or the shape of healing that you're in right now. And that could be your personal, like what's showing up personally, it could be what you're seeing collectively, it could be places that are drawing your attention in the landscape that are supporting the healing or hobbies you have, but kind of what is it looking like for you? Because I feel like for most of us, we're all kind of always healing in different ways. And I just wonder what that feels like for you these days.
Yeah, I feel like we could be here for 3 hours, but there's a couple things that come to mind first, and it is experiencing and reciprocating what actual, real, true belonging is.
Mm,
That sometimes, we talk a lot about patterns that are trying to resolve themselves through the body. Right? We have a bad
mhm.
experience or a challenging experience, maybe as a child, and then we seek out opportunities. And not seek, I don't mean like we consciously seek out those opportunities, but
Yeah.
we end up in dynamics where we're sparring with the same kind of material. And our system is looking for a way to complete that pattern or to complete that cycle or to come out with an outcome that isn't quite so painful. And I think sometimes we get really hooked into that. So one of the pieces around healing for me is in this idea of belonging, how sometimes it's not the circumstances changing, but changing how we relate to the circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's, this piece around like belonging and communal and tending in those ways. There's this piece around how we repair. Just an easy example might be, let's say I have a lot of wounding from my own father, and so I noticed in relationships where a bunch up, like bump up against that with my partner, and it wasn't the partner needing to change, it was me needing to change to the material that was brought up through that
Mm-hmm.
partnership, right? I didn't need them to love me in the way I never got loved. I needed to love me in the way that
Mm-hmm.
I needed to become, what I deserved. And then how do I move from that in relationship? Um, there is a test of the healing aspect of standing in our integrity and being true to our values and
Mm-hmm.
being really clear on our values. What does that mean? Um,
AirPods died on me. Can you hear me still?
Oh, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, good. They just go out and then there's no more time.
Yeah.
Um, this seeing so much atrocity and like we don't really. I just said this the other day online. I was like, you can't stand in your morality if you haven't been challenged in it. You can't
Mm-hmm.
say stealing is wrong if you've never been so hungry that you're pushed to steal food,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And so there's this moral values integral piece that I'm also seeing a lot of healing through. um and then on a very very personal experience, all of that's personal, but like a deep, is this in this cycle of transition into perimenopause 4.5 years ago now, moving in a slower way, aging, feeling more myself than ever, and the slowing down of that and the value in that and the worth in that. Our society gets it wrong that
Mm-hmm.
youth is where where it's at, and that as we age we should just be discarded, because there is a richness and a fullness as a result of my experiences and healing from those experiences that I didn't have when I was much younger. I don't believe we have to suffer to learn, but we do learn through suffering if we choose to.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this richness in life that is abundant and clear and full and so willing to. It's like the wellspring, like feeding myself and others with that too. So yeah, lots of different components in the
Mm-hmm.
um, a lot of waking up and a lot of tragedy and sorrow and despair in the waking up. And for me, that's where, when I feel hopeless, that hope sometimes comes back. There's a spark still in there around. Yeah.
Tracy, thank you so much, just for everything that you've shared today. I just appreciate you showing up not just as a practitioner, but really the ways in which you are weaving in your own lived experience. I learned so much from people when they can bring that part of themselves to these conversations. And I think that as survivors, it's really, really meaningful for us to see other survivors just like really owning their lives, and finding beauty and joy and hope alongside all of these other more tender experiences that we've had. So thank you so much for being here today and for being part of the Breathe Network. We're so just lucky to have you in our community.
Well, and right back to you. Thank you for witnessing me in that. Thank you for that reflection. And I'm so grateful. And shout out Mashid for
Hmm.
mentioning the Breathe Network and letting me find you, and such a beautiful offering available to individuals. And lastly, I would just say that this is really about a, a liberatory experience, that there is an inside and an outside experience of that. And sometimes we only get a morsel of it, and it's worth treasuring and protecting and tending. And if I can be a help, an assist, a contributor, container holder, a part of it, then I'm so appreciative to do this, and really thankful and appreciative to you, Molly, for creating a space to share and to open this up, because I needed it and didn't have access
Mm,
to it back then.
mm, yeah. Yeah, I needed it too. So here we are.
Yeah, yeah,
We're here we are creating it
yeah.
together.
Becoming what we needed. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time, and I hope you have some time for you this afternoon. And I'll just be thinking of you and your son, and just always sending tenderness to you and your family.
Yeah, reciprocating that right back. I hope
Thank you.
you're reuniting with your little one this afternoon.
Yeah,
Has
2 hours.
just an extra specialness to it. Oh, I have
Yeah.
stories about when mine was younger. I do. There's a whole lot in that that we just have to be with. So,
Yeah,
you lots of
yeah.
love and pets to your pups from me.
Yeah, they didn't make any appearances. I heard a couple dreams happening, a little like tussling in their dreams. But yeah, love to your doodle as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have the luxury of caring for a lot of sweet, sweet pets, and Dude is a cool one. So,
I
yeah.
love it. I love the name Dude. It's perfect.
Have a good one, Molly. Thanks.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye.